What do The Handmaid's Tale, Brave New World, and The Color Purple all have in common? They were set to be removed from public school libraries in Edmonton because of sexually explicit content. But after an outcry, the Alberta government hit pause on that ban. But for how long and what happens next? I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. I'm joined now by Laura Winton. She is a past president of the Library Association of Alberta. Welcome back to the podcast, Laura.
Thanks so much for having me again.
So, funnily enough, the last time I was in this chair, you and I were chatting back in June because the Alberta government was developing these sort of guidelines for public school libraries. They were meant to be age appropriate, and they were just sort of talking about 4 books that had received some parental complaints. So how did we get from 4 books that were, maybe questionable according to some parents to almost 200 books sort of outlined by the Edmonton Public School Board as, potentially set to be removed?
Yeah, so the government were true to their word and put together a ministerial order. As they said, they didn't want to ban specific books, so those 4 books were not the limit to the ministerial order. In fact, the order stated that no material with any sexually explicit content could be in any school library, and that only non-explicit sexual content could be in libraries for grades 10 and up. It was a fairly vague and broad order, and schools were not given any support or resources to implement it, and they were told it all had to be done by October 1st. So the Edmonton Public School Board, did the best they could over the summer to pull together a list of materials that were on their shelves that contained sexually explicit material, and certainly lots of classics do. And so that was the list that was developed, and then now the minister and the premier have expressed some surprise at that list, despite the fact that many of us out in the education community and the library community warned them that in fact when you start implementing censorship policies, when you say it's just guidelines and it's going to be specific, it's always going to be subjective, and unfortunately lots of material ends up being removed.
Yeah, right. You mentioned lots of classics have sexually explicit material. I mentioned a few off the top. Also, The Godfather was on that list. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. What was your initial reaction when you saw that full list of titles put out by the Edmonton School Board?
Well, it's heartbreaking, both as a library professional and as a parent of young children, to see that my children and all children's access to information was going to be limited. But it wasn't surprising. This is something that the LAA, the Library Association of Alberta, had been saying would happen to the minister. We'd been expressing concerns since the announcement that the order would come out, along with a number of other groups and the school boards themselves. So very upset, but really not surprised.
Not surprised, yeah. So these guidelines were introduced by Conservative Premier Danielle Smith and her Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides, but even they seemed pretty taken aback by how far this removal list went. Here's what the Premier had to say at a press conference last week.
Edmonton Public is clearly doing a little vicious compliance over what the direction is, and so if they need us to hold their hand through the process to identify what kind of materials are appropriate for senior high school students, what kind of materials are appropriate for junior high school students, and what kind of materials are appropriate for elementary school students, we will more than happily work with them to work through their list one by one so we can be super clear about what it is we're trying to do. We are trying to take sexually explicit content out of elementary schools that is inappropriate for me to show on the television news at night, and so it is inappropriate for 7-year-olds to see.
You can't fault her for having a dramatic delivery. You can just hear the disdain in her voice there. So since Smith made that statement, the province has asked the school boards to pause their removal efforts. Smith said yesterday, quote, "It'll be paused for a couple of hours while the ministerial order is rewritten. The direction will be to take books with pornographic images out of the libraries and to leave the classics alone. I think that there was some misunderstanding of the order, so it's being made clear." End quote. So she herself is calling what Edmonton School Board has put out a provocation. Is that what you think they're doing here, Laura? Are they trying to provoke a response from the province?
You know, I think that the ministerial order, as it's written, requires the removal of the books on that list. I think that the problem with censorship and the problem with state-led legislation that bans or requires the removal of material and limits our intellectual freedom is that everybody has a different idea of what is the right kind of material and who should be reading what. We the government shouldn't be making those decisions. And when the government starts to get involved, what often ends up happening is they're very happy with it, and until something they like gets taken off the shelf. And unfortunately, that's always what happens. So the material in question here that we're looking at is sexually explicit material. But whether or not we're talking about, attempts at censorship of supposedly, right-leaning material or left-leaning material, censorship is always wrong. We need free access to information to be able to participate fully in democracy.
So what kind of efforts are you seeing from libraries, from people in your community in terms of sort of responding to this and perhaps getting set for what will be a new set of orders coming soon?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly the school boards have spoken out against this. The Alberta Teachers Association released a statement. They have, obviously very legitimate concerns about the amount of work that's being created by all of this back and forth and confusion, and with no additional resources. And a number of other new policies are being implemented, and a looming teachers strike. Groups like Canadian School Libraries have spoken out and expressed real concerns. I do think that we're going to continue to see pushback if we do see another ministerial order with revisions saying pornography can't be in school libraries. I think we're going to have the same fight on our hands. Librarians are going to say, well, there is no pornography in school libraries, and Danielle Smith and professional librarians might have some different ideas of what that constitutes. And I think it's also important to note that it's not just librarians, it's parents as well. Like there are parent groups that were behind this, but it's certainly not the majority of parents. The majority of parents stated in the government's own survey that librarians and educators should be making these decisions and not the government.
Well, one person who never stays quiet when it comes to stuff like this is Margaret Atwood. She fired back on Twitter telling Albertans to get their copy of the book of The Handmaid's Tale before they, quote, have public book burnings of it, and joked, don't read it, your hair will catch on fire. Very funny, Margaret Atwood. She also posted a satirical short story mocking life in Alberta under Smith's government. How do you think her response shifted the story? Because, of course, we know that when Margaret Atwood tweets something, it doesn't just get response in Canada. It makes this into potentially a global story.
Yeah, well, I do think that the more media attention that we have on both this issue and concerns with some other legislation that's been put forward by the UCP around, transgender girls in sports and pronoun policies in schools, the more media attention that we have on that, the more international and national attention we get, the more likely it is that that the government is going to listen to the people of Alberta and back away from these troubling policies.
So, Laura, is this really about listening to, a handful of parents and their complaints, or is this part of a wider ideological shift that's happening in the province?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think we have seen a major shift. I think that it's not a coincidence that this ministerial order is happening at the same time as a number of policies in schools that are targeting trans youth. We know that the groups that lobbied the government for this ministerial order specifically, groups like Action for Canada, are explicitly anti-LGBTQ, and so I think this is part of a really unfortunate move to target our LGBTQIA2 LGBTQS plus youth at a time where they need our support. And so I am hopeful that this issue and topic, as well as those others, will continue to get attention in the media, and hopefully there will be more consultation with librarians and educators from the government on how best to manage these issues. And frankly, with this ministerial order, we would all in the library community like to see it repealed completely.
Well, I guess we'll be watching this story closely. I'm supposed to just be a few hours, but I guess we'll see what's coming out from.
I have concerns about any legislation that you can put together in
just a few hours. Yeah, exactly. Laura, really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're having a busy morning.
Thanks so much.
Laura Winton is a past president and current board member of the Library Association of Alberta and vice chair of the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. She joined us from Edmonton. I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. We're going to shift gears now and go from books to music and a K-pop reality series that is getting a lot of people talking. That's Kylie Minogue doing a revamped version of her classic Can't Get You Out of My Head. Can't get that song out of my head now for the rest of the day. That was K-popped alongside K-pop group ATEEZ, just two of many artists featured in the new Apple TV show K-popped, which connects Western pop icons like Minogue with K-pop groups to reimagine their big hits. The lineup is incredible. We've got Spice Girls, Boyz II Men, TLC, Boy George, a little bit nostalgic as well, and groups like ITZY, Kep1er, and Stacy. It lands at a time when people are obsessed with shows like K-pop Demon Hunters. Certainly my household has not stopped singing Takedown and Golden. And people want to see more K-pop. So does this musical mashup deliver? Michelle Cho and Hannah Sung are here to answer that. Good morning, both.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hannah, I didn't even name all of the artists that are involved here. And Lionel Richie and Megan Thee Stallion are executive producers. Megan's a host alongside Psy of Gangnam Style fame, if you remember that moment. So what did you think when you first heard about this show and some of the big names that were involved?
Yeah, well, when I first saw the trailer, I just was blown away. And my expectations were, as I watched the trailer, just amped more and more. You know, I kind of couldn't believe, first of all, that Megan Thee Stallion and Psy were put together to host a show. I mean, already they are the best of Western and Eastern stardom, if you ask me. Like, they're so lovable. They're just the consummate entertainers. But then on top of that, the nostalgia value of all of the Western artists who are brought in. I was so amped up to watch this show, especially because I couldn't believe the Western lineup, especially for a child of the 80s and 90s, as I am.
Yeah.
But also any show that's going to bring these worlds together. I have so much curiosity, just like everybody else, as you mentioned, about the K-pop system, about what's going on over there. So I was really blown away by the scope and the ambition of the show.
Now, you know, just looking at that list, why do you think some of those people wanted to take part in a show about K-pop? Because I think it's, you know, yeah, we've been talking about this phenomenon for a while, but I still think, you know, in terms of mainstream awareness, we're still just getting there. So, you know, why is someone like Boyz II Men want to get involved in a show about K-pop, do you think? Hannah.
Well, I have, I've got two answers to that, and I'm sure Michelle has got a million, but I would say number one is the future. I mean, these artists want to be relevant.
Yeah.
And then also the artists themselves said on the show, like Patti LaBelle and I believe Vanilla Ice said, when my kids found out that a K-pop show had approached me, they said, oh, you got to do it. You know, so it's for multiple factors, but I think these artists are interested and interesting in terms of they like to keep doing new things. And they look to the East to an entirely new system, an entirely new star system and new ways of doing things. And they're curious. They want to try things. And I love that about them. In fact, I felt that a lot of the Western artists came off pretty great in the show because they're pushing the boundaries of what they can do. And they're not just, some of them, their biggest hits are from decades ago. But I love to see them, coming back and trying something new. They were clearly very into it. I loved it.
They were game.
They were game.
They were game. Michelle, this is also a co-production with a Korean entertainment powerhouse, CJENM. Did that involvement affect your expectations? Were you, looking to this to be sort of, an echo of what it can be in Korea?
Totally. I mean, I think that the production team, so in addition to bringing together the artists that we see kind of meet up on the show, I also was thinking about the expertise that a company like CJENM, which owns the cable station Mnet, which is South Korea's answer to MTV, would also be bringing. Some of K-pop's most popular groups right now, including Twice and Stray Kids, they were actually formed on Mnet reality competition shows. And so, I thought they would that production team would bring that kind of expertise in storytelling and bringing this kind of really compelling kind of drama of the competition series. In addition to all of their amazing casting, I mean, Mr. Gangnam Style himself, Psy, is a part of this. Patti LaBelle is legendary. So where would you see that particular combination of things? Another thing is that one of the executive producers is Mickey Lee, who is not necessarily a household name, but she is such a powerhouse. She is the vice chairman of CJ Group and also is executive producer of the film Parasite. So when you have those kind of high-level creatives involved, that really amps up the expectations.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I guess, Hannah, we should explain what the format of the show actually is. There's 8 episodes. It's also a competition show. So just talk us through what happens on K-Popped.
Yes, so it is a highly formatted show where they take 2 big Western artists, they match them with a K-pop band, and then you have them on stage and the stage literally splits in half. So they split the K-pop group in half and then they have all the fans chant, split, split, split. So they kind of manufacture this competition within the K-pop band by saying, okay, half of you are going with this legendary artist, half of you are going over here. And then you're going to reimagine their biggest hits. So, J Balvin, Mi Gente, Kylie Minogue, Can't Get You Out of My Head, as we heard. And then they go head to head when they come back and they perform. The performances are really outstanding. And some of them I like better than others, okay? But they were really dazzling. And then the audience votes and they vote with their light sticks, which I thought was a pretty clever device because it's pretty central to the K-pop world in terms of the fans are so central in K-pop. And so they will light up their light sticks to go purple for one group or gold for the other group. And then you get Psy in this pre-taped segment kind of come out and say, okay, who did you choose? And then they reveal the winner. And I thought it was a lot of fun. It was clearly very mapped out. The competition wasn't always very, there were no stakes. Let's just say there were no stakes. Yeah, I was going to say,
what did they win? Do they get anything? Or
Nothing.
Is this just for clout, for audience favor?
Yeah, a little bit of that. Some people online have said, K-pop fans have kind of discussed this show and said, well, you couldn't have a K-pop band go head to head with another K-pop band because sometimes the online fandom can, let's just say, go overboard. So, it can become a little bit toxic online. Yeah. So there was some speculation of maybe this is the way that they decided to do it is they keep it within one fandom, Either way, it's I think the audiences, we are quite sophisticated in terms of what we want from a competition show. And it's we need an unknown who's going to win fame and $1 million, for the stakes to be there nowadays. And so, the competition part to me, it was a little bit of a puzzler to me. I didn't quite understand why they needed to bake that in because just the performances themselves were, everybody won, frankly. When you see those clips online and they're circulating on social media, everybody Eve, everyone who is posting their performances from the show, they're getting a huge boost. And I love that for them. So they didn't really need the competition, but that was the format of the show.
Okay, cool. So, you mentioned how game a lot of these Western artists were. They're super excited to have their songs K-popped. Here's Megan Thee Stallion from the first episode.
I love K-pop. It is so fire with its killer choreo, fresh looks, and die-hard fans. As K-pop's #1 fan, I'm kicking it off. K-pop in my head, savage. Challenging the godmother of soul, in soul, Miss Patti LaBelle. And she's definitely not playing.
Okay, Michelle, what does it mean to have your song K-popped?
Okay, so I have to admit that I was also asking that question throughout my watch of the show.
Yeah.
Because the show never actually comes out and says, this is our definition of the K-pop treatment. And so then I was a little bit concerned that, like, if I, who knows a lot about K-pop, I'm not sure what that means. And I'm not quite certain that the target audience for the show is going to understand it either. And I also wasn't quite sure who that might be, but I kind of guessed that it would be a kind of mainstream American audience that has heard of K-pop, might not be that familiar with it, but are definitely interested in learning more. But then I was kind of like, okay, so what are the common features of the different performances? Being K-pop seems to mean you have clearly K-pop idols performing your song, covering it with great choreography, huge stage presence, a lot of synchronization in certain cases, and then some translated or added lyrics in Korean, along with a little bit of like rearrangement, maybe adding some surprising new musical genres to the way that you're reinterpreting it. So that seems to be the definition. But it varied across different performances and different matchups. And so sometimes I think that the songs were kept closer to their originals, mostly for that nostalgia value.
Now, Michelle, I wonder if there is a danger when you're doing something like that in it going from a celebration of the format to almost like a stereotype, or like what is it to be K-popped, and then does it end up being just a mishmash of assumptions about what K-pop is? Did it ever feel like that to you?
Right. It didn't. And I think that what is the saving grace of the show. So I don't know if it's clear, but I had quite mixed feelings about it. I was expecting a lot and unfortunately wasn't sure that the show quite delivered on its promise. But what was really refreshing about it was how kind people were to each other, how this kind of cross-cultural encounter was presented as something that, can be awkward, inevitably so. But if people are, coming together with an open mind and really not being interested in kind of stereotyping or judging each other, then it is really fun. And so that element and the kind of kindness comes through in a way that I think can be a little bit missing in public discourse in North America today. So I do think that, the show really presents that aspect. The celebrities end up being, I think, revealing of their personalities because they are encountering each other across, barriers of language and culture.
Hannah, it sounds like you also sort of have a mixed reaction to the show. What do you, speaking of K-pop Demon Hunters and how well it did with the genre and with audiences, why would an animated movie do better than a show that seems like poised to celebrate the genre perfectly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really interesting to juxtapose the two of these shows this summer while K-pop Demon Hunters is such a phenomenon. And I think that it comes down to, well, K-pop, the show, really bit off a lot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it tried to do a lot. And in some ways it did succeed. I just think the way that the show was so ambitious and it's almost like it wanted to be some sort of teaching tool or like an entree, right? For mainstream audiences. So I will applaud them for that. I will applaud Lionel Richie, Megan Thee Stallion, all the people
Sorry, Hannah,
involved.
I got to leave it there, but I really appreciate you both being with us here. Michelle Cho is a professor with the Department of East Asian Studies at the University of Toronto, and Hannah Sung works at the Equality Fund based in Toronto. K-Popped is streaming now. You can watch it on Apple TV+. And I'm Amil Niazi, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Thanks for listening.